Hello, all the ladies in the house. It's great to see you this morning. Women's History Month is wrapping up, but it's not over yet, and Salt Lake City's done quite a bit of work to examine our own pay equity in Salt Lake City Corporation. And it's important not only that we have a Women's Day that we had in the middle of March, but that we recognize that Utah ranks worst in the nation year after year after year for women's pay equity, which means if you're a woman doing the same job or equal work as a male colleague, you likely make 71 cents on the dollar to that male who makes $1. And that's if you're a white woman. And if you're a woman of color, that pay goes down and down and down. This is completely unacceptable, and it's really astonishing in the year 2022 that we can still look our employees in the face who we rely on, whether you're a small business or you're a large corporation, that we can look our employees in the eye and still not pay them fairly. It's so unacceptable that Salt Lake City took on an audit. We partnered with a global compensation management and consulting firm back in the fall of 2020, in the fall of 2020. And we took on a proactive review of our about 1,000 non-represented employees. So in Salt Lake City, the majority of our employees are represented by unions, and so their pay grades and their pay progression is already outlined in our MOUs with those union organizations. That's why we looked at our non-represented employees specifically. And I am proud to say that by and large, employees performing the same or substantially equal work in Salt Lake City Corporation are paid equitably when we consider their age, their gender, and ethnicity. Undertaking this degree of work requires a willingness at the outset to accept whatever the data turns up and correct those changes. Out of our 1,000 employees and their salaries that were analyzed, only 3 pay discrepancies were found, and we have already remedied those. I so appreciate the work of our Human Resources Department, many of whom are here today, for really heading up this effort and the willingness, that wonderful, robust vulnerability that we embrace at Salt Lake City Corporation to ask the hard questions of ourselves so that we can turn out to the rest of Salt Lake City's economy and to our own employees and say, please follow, please do this. Please take the work not just to do an audit of a handful of your employees, but to go line by line and person by person to make sure, as we did, that only 3 people out of 1,000 probably wouldn't have been caught if we'd done a general audit. Please take the time, whether you're a small business or a large corporation, a nonprofit, or whatever entity you are, please do this evaluation, because the income and the stability of our families in this community are depending upon it. We believe every employee in our corporation deserves to be compensated fairly for the work they do, and that compensation should never, ever be contingent upon their gender. I want to thank David Salazar, who's going to speak now after me, from Salt Lake City's Human Resources team, and then Sylvia Castro with the Suazo Business Center. And then I think we'll be happy to take questions individually afterward if you want. David?
Thank you, Mayor. It really is a privilege to be part of Salt Lake City Corporation and working under your leadership, work that you started as a city council member and now as mayor of Salt Lake City. One of the things that we're most proud of is not only being Utah's capital city, but also a local area leader. And I'd like to consider us as the state's premier public employer. And so the fact that we can declare today that we've done the work and have found that we are exactly where we want to be, and that is a pay equity leader, is really something for us to tout, and something that other cities around Utah and also outside of Utah who watch and looking to follow what Salt Lake City does. As the mayor mentioned, what we strive for in the city is to make sure that we have that pay equality in the city, and we work closely with our hiring managers and others our recruiting team in our own department to make sure that all of our job offers really do get that look to make sure that we're not creating or establishing any kind of inequities that might result in pay differences that we simply don't want to have among our employees. And so that's our commitment today and going forward is to continue with the work that we've started, and we'll continue to monitor and watch closely and make sure that what we do takes into account not somebody's gender, not their ethnicity or their age, but the experience that they bring to the table. And that's what we value most here at Salt Lake City. So thank you, Mary.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Perfect, thank you. Thank you. I am glad to be part of this conference, especially during Women's History Month. I also want to commend the Salt Lake City Mayor for this initiative. There is always, Utah always shows up in the news in one of the least likely places that we want it to be, especially when it comes to women equity, and also when it comes to racial equity. So hearing of these initiatives, we wanted to be able to really let people know that this is something that is possible. It's possible in more than one jurisdiction. It's possible across the state. And it's something that kind of helps us all. So one of the studies that the Federal Reserve did was a data on economic gaps. And they literally looked at if we were to address the disparities in when it comes to gender, when it comes to racial equity, when it comes to those gaps, what would it do to the economy? Part of the study, it showed that if Utah would have addressed these disparities from 2005 to 2019, our GDP would have grown by 23 billion. 23 billion. 23 billion due to increase in earnings, in employment, in hours work, and educational attainment. One of the things that I think is important to understand is that pay equity is not a zero-sum game. We all benefit when there is pay equity. And when we look at GDP as a measure of shared prosperity, we want to ensure that we are not leaving anyone behind. Utah has one of the strongest economies in the state. We're lucky to be in a very diverse, in a very healthy state, but we want to ensure that no one gets left behind. Unfortunately, these racial and equity gaps have long existed. They're historical. But it is up to policymakers, it is up to community development organizations, it's up to nonprofits, it's up to small business owners and big business owners to be able to, they all have a role in examining what factors are constraining people from being successful in the labor market. Because frankly, some of these factors include hiring practices, workplace culture, and lack of support for families. When it comes to childcare, that's a big issue that will actually leave women behind. At the same time, we can all focus on creating equitable neighborhood conditions that enable opportunity, health, and well-being for individuals and families. So today, I would encourage everyone to consider all the ways you can apply this research, you can apply this initiative to build an economy that allows everybody a chance to thrive. If anything we should have learned from COVID is how it affected these specific communities. We want to take those lessons to heart. We want to be able to look at solutions that are permanent. And again, I commend the mayor for taking on this initiative, and I will also would love to see this initiative being carried across the state. Thank you.